Now we're going to talk through an example using Stephen's Woodshop. And you're looking at the top section of the profit and loss statement right now. I'm going to scroll through this as we talk. So I put a big blank space underneath this just so we could focus on the numbers on the top, but just know that normally it's going to look more like the spreadsheet example we just saw where one section flows right after the other. So when we look at the revenue or the sales from Stephen's income, what you'll see is that there are 4 different product lines that Stephen's going to be dealing with. So he's going to be selling bat houses, he's going to be selling wishing wells, he's going to be selling karate fixtures, and then he has other lawn product sales that he's going to be offering to customers. So as we just mentioned, you'll see or you'll notice that there are 4 different line items for these. So he's tracking the revenue from each of these different product lines separately. And you'll see how that begins to play out too in the numbers section of this. So he's not initially projecting any sales in January, February, or March of the bat houses. And that may be because it's going to take him a little bit longer to build a few of those, so he's not even really planning to start sales. In April, he plans to sell $100 worth, in May, $200 worth, in June, $200 worth, and so on and so forth. And then you'll see where it totals up at the end of the year so that we know he's projecting $1,550 in bat house sales for the year. Same kind of thing is occurring with the wishing wells line item, right? So we see January sales are 250, February he's projecting sales of 500, March and April 500 again, in May it bumps up to 1,000. And one of the things you'll notice right off the bat is the difference between these different line items or the 2 line items in terms of how much sales he's projecting. So obviously in looking at this, one of the first things you know is that the wishing wells are selling at a higher price than the bat houses. So the wishing wells sell for $250 a piece. In January, he's projecting sales of 1. In February, he's projecting sales of 2. In May, he's projecting his highest sales for the year because everybody's getting going on their garden and getting things going again for the year. And in May, he projects selling 4 of them. So you see how the profit and loss statement is tracking not just how much we're projecting in terms of sales revenue, but it's reflecting the price. And it's really reflecting what we think the sales spread will look like over the course of the year. Each of the 4 project lines or product lines do total in this total revenue and sales. So we see that his total sales for January are projected to be 336. And you see variation in the sales figures across the months, which is pretty common for small business. So it would be really rare to see a business that had the exact same sales figure every month. And you see that also he's projecting the highest sales in the warmest months of the year. And again, that's because so many of these things are associated with lawn items and people being outside. And so he's anticipating he's not going to be selling as much in the colder months when people aren't paying as much attention to what's going on outside. So they total across this bottom line for each month. And then again, there are the annual totals. So between all 4 product service lines, he's expecting projected sales of $10,286. Right off the cuff, that sounds pretty good, right? But you can't look at the sales figures alone because there's a whole lot more that goes into the business financials than just how much you can sell. It's an important component, but it's not the only component. So we'll scroll down to the next section and we'll look at what are some of the expenses that he's expecting, right? And remember, this cost of production has to do with the materials that are going into the development of the products that he's selling. And as we just discussed, you should see a separate line item for each of the different product lines he has. So you see cost of sales for the materials that are going to go into the bat houses, the lumber and the different hardware that's going to go into the production of the wishing wells, the bricks and the lumber that go into the karate fixtures, and finally, the cost of materials and raw goods that are going to go into the different lawn products that he's making. And again, what you'll see is that these vary depending on what the product or service line is. So it's not the same for everything. The materials for the bat houses, if you look at how the numbers play out, he's projecting that he's going to be $30 of raw materials for every $100 that he sells. For the wishing wells, it's going to be $50 of raw materials for every $250 that he sells. So again, you can see how there's this very interrelated relationship between the cost of production and the sales. And that's what this gross profit line is trying to get at. So in Stephen's case, in the month of January, he's projecting sales of $336, but he's not going to make all of that money, right? Because some of that money is going straight out the door just in terms of the raw material that it costs to build what he's building. The cost of sales for that particular month are $89. So his gross profit for January is the $336 in sales minus the $89 of raw materials, gives him a gross profit in January of $247. Again, this is calculated across the year, and what we'll see is that he starts with, for the annual figure, $10,286 in gross sales or total revenue. But when we subtract this $2,700 of cost of production, he ends up with a gross profit amount of $7,570. Other operating expenses are then subtracted from this gross profit amount. So that's where we'll start with the deduction of what else is going to go into the running of the business.